My name is Rob MacDormond. We're a small association in Western Canada, and our headquarters is in the Vancouver area of British Columbia. And we're in our 116th year right now, so we've been around for quite a while. We have this magazine, which is our main outreach, and I'll just give you a shot of it here. There's a copy of it. And we encourage people to write for it. And we also encourage people that if they read the magazine and they like it, pass it on to somebody else. So we'll go back to our address. You can write us, send us a letter, or email us. We also have an interesting website that has a lot of stuff on it. And we have a presentation of Israel Truth on both Spotify and YouTube, and it's the same presentation on both of them. The interesting thing about this is that the man that takes you through it is not a human being. He's a computer-generated guy, an AI man. So if you like that kind of thing, you might find it kind of interesting. So I will get into the talk about my subject. Israel, something is blocking it, but Israel in the wilderness and the kingdom age. And there are a couple of shots of wilderness somewhere, and I'm not sure where, but I thought they were pretty good shots of the wilderness. We'll start with history. The people of Israel were divided into two nations, as you all know, the northern nation, the kingdom of Israel, and the southern nation, the kingdom of Judah. And they were besieged by the Assyrians from the Assyrian Empire. 2 Kings chapter 17 has the record of the invasion of the northern kingdom. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. Now, this was actually the third invasion by Assyria. In 1 Chronicles 5, verse 26, there was an invasion that took away 3 tribes, Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben, in about 745 BC. Following that, around 739 BC, there was another invasion by Assyria where they took away the tribe of Naphtali. And that was in 2 Kings 15, verse 29. Well, then a few years later, several years later, they came again, only this time down upon the kingdom of Judah to the south. They'd already taken all of the northern tribes away, but as I said, the first two invasions took 4 tribes away, so there really were only about 6 left in the northern kingdom. The Assyrians didn't always take everybody away. There were still some farmers and people left around that escaped. But they came against the land of Judah in 678 BC. In 2 Kings chapter 18, now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. And all that was left was basically Jerusalem. And God spared Jerusalem, and I'm sure you know the story of how God sent an angel to defend the city when Hezekiah cried to God about it. That was in a later invasion. And God spared them so that they could be taken to Babylon, and then some of them returned to set up the Judah nation in preparation of the Christ child coming. It was all God's plan. So here's just picture showing what happened when Assyria came. Now there was a succession of empires that happened. The Assyrian Empire only lasted another 70 years, and they were conquered by the Babylonians. The Babylonians, in turn, only lasted another 70 years after that, and they were conquered by the Medo-Persians. The Israelites broke free of the domination of the Assyrians and the Babylonians as those nations weakened and became barbarian tribes that were very unruly and very hard to manage. So when the Medo-Persian Empire took over, they decided to try to bring some of these people under their control again. So the next part is something that I put together from 3 sources that I looked at. The Encyclopedia Britannica, a book called The Story of Celto-Saxon Israel by W.H. Bennett, and that's available from the Canadian British Israel Association in Canada, possibly from other sources, I'm not sure. And also the Bible Research Collection, which was put out years ago by the British Israel World Federation. I don't know if it's still in publication. Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 BC. He's spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, and Isaiah prophesied about him ahead of time. Isaiah chapter 45, verse 1, "Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, and open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut." Cyrus was commissioned by God to release people from Judah to return to the Holy Land, to rebuild in preparation for the Christ child, even though Cyrus didn't know that's what he was doing. But Cyrus wanted to bring the hostile Israelites that had become barbarians and roving tribes under his control again. So he mounted an attack. Or actually, there were 2 wars that he fought against them. And unfortunately for him, in the second one, he was killed. He fought against one of the Saki tribes called the Massagetae. They were led by a queen whose name was Tamara, or another name for her is Tomarus. And Cyrus was killed in 529 BC. Now Cyrus had appointed his partner Darius, who's mentioned in the book of Daniel, as the ruler of Babylon. And Darius was wanting to take revenge upon these Massagetae people that were, we believe, of the tribes of Israel. And so he came against them. He was very close to Cyrus. He evidently had married Cyrus's daughter, Atossa. He came against the Israelites with an army, and they fled to the Caucasus Mountain. Now they went into a pass which was later called the Pass of Israel by the locals in legend. and he fought with them in the Darien Gorge, or another name is the Gorge of Darius. He was not successful in subduing them, and he had to retreat. He then went back and became the emperor of the Medo-Persian Empire. The Massageti fled through the Pass of Israel, but it took them some time to get through, over a year, and they emerged into, well, what would be Georgia today. They made their way gradually west and eventually into Europe. We believe that other Israelite tribes followed them through the Pass of Israel. So they emerged in Israel with a new beginning in the wilderness of Israel, because in the wilderness of Europe, because Europe was a wilderness at that time. There were just some Celtic tribes that had villages here and there, but it was still pretty much a wilderness that far back in history. There was a French minister and Huguenot named Jacques Abadie who wrote in 1723, and he said, unless the 10 tribes of Israel are flown into the air or sunk into the earth, they must be those 10 Gothic tribes that entered Europe in the 5th century and founded the 10 nations of modern Europe. And there was a prophecy made about the Israelites being a savage people, and we believe that it applies to the Saxon tribes. In Micah chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. So most of Israel at this time was in the wilderness of Europe. Now I'd like to talk about a prophecy that most of you would know about in Revelation chapter 12. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm gonna read a couple more prophecies here about Israel in the wilderness. Therefore, Hosea chapter 2, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfortably unto her, and I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope, and she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. Ezekiel 34 is another one. I will make with them a covenant of peace, and will cause the evil beasts to cease out of the land, and they shall dwell safely in the wilderness, and sleep in the woods, and I will make them and the places round about my hill a blessing, and I will cause the shower to come down in his season. There shall be showers of blessing. We believe this is mostly for the future kingdom age, but it also applies to the past when God sent them into the wilderness for their blessing. So now we'll go to Revelation chapter 12 and about the woman. Revelation chapter 12. There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, in pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. I'm going to read 2 more chapters that I didn't put in here. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. So the 12 stars are representative of the 12 tribes of Israel. But she was the mother of our Lord. Moving on to the latter part of this chapter. When the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. This woman was not Mary, because Mary did not have wings and fly into the wilderness. So who was this woman? And Jesus himself gives the answer to who this woman was, this woman that is his mother. Matthew chapter 12. Then one said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, Who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples, and said, Behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. So it was the early followers of Judah and Benjamin and Levi that were his mother at the time. And I realize that many people say, well, all of the tribes were in the Jews. But if you go back to Ezra and Nehemiah, where it has the setting up of the nation in preparation for Christ, there were only 3 tribes mentioned. Ezra and Nehemiah did not mention any other tribes but those 3. Now, there could have been a few that came in, a very, very tiny few, because Hezekiah had a great Passover feast. And he invited all the tribes of Israel to come and partake. But there were only a very few people from 3 tribes that came. And that was from Asher and Manasseh and Zebulun. And some of them might have stayed in Jerusalem and therefore were spared the Assyrian slaughter that happened 6 years later. And some of them might have been in the nation of the Jews. But they would be such a tiny number that really there were only 3 tribes there: Benjamin, Levi, and Judah. So this woman, that was, to begin with, the mother of our Lord. But she has some other identities too, I believe. I believe she's also called the New Jerusalem. She's called Mount Zion. And I believe she takes the identity of the olive tree that is tame. And the olive tree that was wild was Israel in Europe, which was wild and had not turned to Christ at that time, but later converted to him. So one of her identities, I believe, was Mount Zion. And here's a kind of a dramatic picture that I pulled up. I believe there was a prophecy about her that was given by Jesus, and I don't think most people recognize this as a prophecy. But here it is, Mark chapter 11, verse 23. Jesus said, For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. And I believe the early followers of Jesus did cast that mountain into the sea of the Gentiles, and it went to the lost tribes of Israel. The sea was representative of the Gentile world, and that's where they were. So that's just a little aside that I had come up with. Now, the tribes of Israel were in Europe. Some of them went very far west. And especially, there was one tribe that ended up, I believe, completely in the British Isles. And I believe they're still there. The tribe of Joseph lives here. And my apologies to the Americans, because the tribe of Joseph also lives there with the tribe of Manasseh. So there are beautiful prophecies about Joseph. The first one I'm pulling up is given by Jacob. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, stone of Israel, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. This is a wonderful blessing for the people of Joseph, but I believe they were fulfilled. The next one was given by Moses, Deuteronomy 33:16 and 17. And for the precious things of the earth and the fullness thereof, and for the good will of him that dwelt in the bush, let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim. They are the thousands of Manasseh. I want to point out especially one part of this, that Joseph would push the people together to the ends of the earth, and that he pushed like a bull. The tribe that had the strength of the bull. Now, I'm going to talk about Israel being pushed into the ends of the earth. We'll start with the Highland clearances. They happened in the mid to 18th century. It was the forced eviction of inhabitants from the Highlands and the Western Islands, the north half of Scotland and the islands. People were cleared out for sheep. It followed the Jacobite rebellion of 1745 under Charles Stuart. The Battle of Culloden in 1746 gave the victory to the English over them. And for a while, tartans and bagpipes were outlawed. Outsiders bought Highland land. The clearing of the land took place over the next century. People went to crofts on the shores of Scotland. They gathered kelp and fish. The kelp industry eventually declined. Cattle prices dropped, and the potato blight hit in 1846. People went into the lowlands of Scotland. They went to Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand. They went all over the British Empire. I want to talk for a minute about the Declaration of Independence, 13 AD, to Pope John the 22nd, signed in the Abbey of Arbroath by the Scottish nobles. Now, I don't want to read the whole thing here. If you want later on, you can go on YouTube and call this up and freeze the screen and read the whole thing. But I wanted to point out about what the Scots said about them coming to Scotland 1,200 years after the outgoing of the people of Israel. It was thought that that was the Exodus from Egypt. But I read an article by the late Doug Nesbitt, who was the president of British Israel World Federation Canada. And in that, he said that it could not mean the outgoings from Egypt, because the years don't add up. The Scots themselves say they came from Scythia, and they say that they came to Scotland around 500 AD. So it had to mean the captivity taken by the Assyrians around 1720 BC. Now the Scots say that they sailed through the Mediterranean and landed in Spain for a while, and then they went their way to Scotland. So they then did not go through the Pass of Israel. They must have somehow traversed over through what is Turkey now and ended up at the Mediterranean and went by boat. But I have a theory about what tribe they were that came out of the attack by the Assyrians, the captivity there. There were 6 tribes left, as I said. 4 of them were taken earlier in 2 attacks by the Assyrians. So there was the tribe of Ephraim, tribe of Dan, tribe of Asher, tribe of Simeon, tribe of Issachar, tribe of Zebulun. And I believe that the Scots were the tribe of Simeon. The reason I say this is because of the prophecy about Simeon given by Jacob. It said that Simeon would be scattered in Israel. And I believe that describes the Highland clearances very well, that they were scattered all over the world. They went not only to every part of the British Empire, but they went to the United States. And they were not like the Irish. The Irish went to the United States because they were very angry at the British about what happened in the potato famine. Now, the tribe of Simeon was not identified by Moses. It was the only tribe that Moses did not bless. So we have no identifying marks about the tribe of Simeon. The only identifying marks we have is what Jacob said, that they would be scattered, along with the tribe of Levi that was supposed to be scattered. But the tribe of Levi was scattered in the time of Joshua. They were sent to all parts of Israel in the different cities that were sent to all different parts of where the Israelites settled. So they were scattered in the time of Joshua. That was already fulfilled. But I believe the Highland clearances fulfilled that prophecy about Simeon. Okay, we'll go to the next event, the Irish potato famine. It's a terrible thing. It happened for 5 years, from 1845 to 1849. There was the potato blight, and it didn't just affect Ireland. It was all through Europe, and it was in Scotland, but it hit Ireland the hardest. And there were tenant farmers and cottiers. I think I got that right. So the cottiers didn't own anything; they just worked. They depended so heavily on potatoes. They got 80% of their caloric intake from potatoes. But during this time, grain was continued to be exported from Ireland. The landowners were not necessarily Irish and not necessarily living in Ireland. The British brought in corn from the United States, but it did not have the same nutritional value of the potatoes. So it caused malnutrition. Able-bodied people were sent to workhouses. Some landowners tried to feed the people, but they ran out of money. Big landowners were buying out smaller landowners. Soup kitchens were set up that fed about 3 million people. Unfortunately, about 1 million people died of malnutrition and diseases like typhus that were caused by malnutrition. Around 2 million people left for the United States. Okay, from 1841 to 1850, 49% of the immigrants to the United States were Irish. In 1921, Ireland gained its independence. But by then, the population was only about half of what it was before the Irish potato famine. Okay, we can see that these things were pushing people out. And Joseph was definitely pushing people to the ends of the earth. Okay, we'll go ahead here to Australia. To begin with, convicts were sent to America, but in 1776, America broke free and became an independent nation. They said they would not take any more convicts from Britain. So about 10 years later, Britain decided to send convicts to New South Wales. Men and women were sent, and it was obvious that the British government wanted them to start families and start colonizing the land. The first fleet went in 1787, and the next fleet of people in 1792. Convicts would work about 7 years, and then most of them were freed and could work on government land, or some of them were given plots of land. By 1830, 58,000 of them had been sent. But in 1829, Edward Gibbon Wakefield published a work called A Letter from Sydney, and it proposed selling small plots of land to families for a modest price to send to the region. In 1831, families started emigrating to New South Wales. The population increased at a huge rate until at 1851, the population was 9 times what it was in 1825. From 1851 to 1861, the population went from 450,000 to 1,150,000. When you think about it, when the prophecy was made, the ends of the earth to the west would have been the British Isles, and to the south would be the south tip of Africa, even though nobody went there. But it was, I believe, part of where Israel was supposed to go later. But today, if you want to think about the end of the earth to the west, you can't go much farther than Alaska. If you want to think about the end of the earth to the north, you can't go farther than Ellesmere Island in Canada or Greenland. If you want to think about going to the end of the earth to the southeast, you can't go farther than New Zealand and Australia. Our people were pushed to the end of the earth just as prophesied. Thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Thou, whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, Thou art my servant, I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. Until the Spirit be poured. Just a minute. I have a hard time reading the bottom ones. Till the Spirit be poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness be a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. Then judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field. Now this, of course, talks about the kingdom age, but the Anglo-Saxon people did go into the wilderness areas and make farms, made the wilderness turn into fruitful fields. They planted parks. They made beautiful cities. Some of them have not turned into beautiful cities lately. Of course, we're not in the we're not in the majority yet at this time. We're basically the biggest ethnic minority in many of our nations. Anyhow, we are in the wilderness, and we have done what God meant us to do. Many people are trying to bash the Anglo-Saxon people, saying they're colonial, they're people that have abused others, they've hurt the others, they've forced their religion on others. My question is, what did God want? Do people ever ask, what did God want? Those religions that were in the wilderness areas that the Anglo-Saxon people went to, they could not give people eternal life. Only Jesus Christ could give people eternal life. He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Sorry. I've lost the other one. It's by Peter, where he says, there is no other name whereby we must be saved. I believe that's in 14th chapter of Acts. Can't find it right now. Anyhow, yes, our people have gone into the wilderness areas. You know, I've gone up to the Indian Reserve north of here, and I've worshipped with those people up there, and they built themselves a beautiful church. And they have an indigenous pastor there. They don't need the Anglo-Saxon people to share the gospel with them and teach them about Jesus. They have their own people. We've come a long way here. And, you know, I was in southern Saskatchewan in, the prairie areas of Canada a few years ago. And I went into a museum, and it talked about a minor war that there was between the Anglo-Saxon people and the native people there. And the write-up was kind of interesting because it blamed the Anglo-Saxon people that believed in evolution for this problem. And the theory of evolution is that the strong will take over and the weak will die off. And they seem to have contempt for the indigenous people. Christians do not have that attitude. We believe that all human beings were created in the image of God. And through receiving Jesus Christ, we all have the ability to become the children of God, which is the highest form of humanity that anybody could attain to. So that was the problem, I believe, is Anglo-Saxons that went out that really were not Christians and did not believe in God. That was what caused problems. Anyhow, what's next for our people? We're in the wilderness areas of the world. So what's next on the world stage? And I'm kind of pessimistic about what's coming soon, because this is what I think. This is the powder keg of the world. And I believe there's a big war coming to fulfill the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 38 and the last part of Daniel chapter 11. And I'm not going to go into this. Many people have different opinions about how this will all turn out. But personally, I have my personal belief that either after that war or perhaps even during it, this will happen. That the Lord will return. And that he will establish his laws in the world. And the law shall go forth from Zion. The law is not really preached much in our churches now. I think if you ask most people in churches, well, let's say, what's the eighth commandment? They'd have to really think about it, and a lot of people couldn't even answer it. But anyhow, I believe the Lord will welcome us one day into something beautiful. We have something, wonderful already, but I believe something much more wonderful is coming, and I look forward to it. And as far as the wilderness becoming a fruitful place, I believe that's going to happen 10 times or 100 times more than it has. So that's what I look forward to with great hope and joy and anticipation.